It was a Tuesday morning when Nathan Calloway's world began to shift, though at the time he didn't know it. The sky over Manhattan was a steel gray, the city already humming with impatient horns and distant sirens as he stepped out of the black town car and into the lobby of the glinting Calloway Tower. His phone buzzed in his hand before the automatic doors even slid shut behind him. 9 a.m. strategy call pushed to 8:45. His assistant, Marla, texted. Nathan didn't react. He barely blinked anymore at the way his life rearranged itself minute by minute. He crossed the polished floor, nodded once at the security guard who always tried to say more, and headed to the executive elevator. His suit was charcoal, his tie a darker shade, every thread tailored and precise. Nathan moved like someone with places to be, power to exert, problems to solve. What he didn't have time for, not really, was a detour to the New York Lifeblood Clinic. But a promise was a promise. The charity gala had been one of those things he half listened to when Marla handed him the schedule, her voice a persistent hum over the noise of his deals. They're asking VIPs to participate in a citywide donation drive, photo ops, social goodwill, all of that. He'd said yes not because he particularly cared, but because it made the company look good. The kind of good that softened the edges of ruthless quarterly earnings calls and harsh restructuring memos. Now 32 floors above the city, Nathan sat in a leather chair, his suit jacket folded neatly over one armrest, his shirt sleeve rolled up. A nurse attached the line to his arm, her hands practiced, face kind. "You're all set, Mr. Calloway, shouldn't take long." He gave her a practiced nod, settled back, and turned his attention to the screen of his phone. Emails, numbers, reports. He didn't notice the girl at first. She hovered in the hallway, half hidden behind a frosted glass partition, clutching something against her chest. She couldn't have been more than 11. Her backpack sagged from one shoulder, her eyes locked on him, unblinking. When she took a step forward, Nathan didn't look up. It wasn't until she cleared her throat, softly, the way kids do when they're trying not to interrupt but also not be ignored, that he glanced toward her. "Are you Nathan Calloway?" she asked. His brow pulled tight, he nodded slowly. "Yes." The girl didn't smile. She stepped forward again, holding out the folder she'd been hugging. Inside were papers, documents, test results. "Then you're my dad." The silence that followed was brief but complete. Even the quiet beeping from the machines seemed to recede. Nathan didn't move. She stood with her chin slightly lifted, her eyes wide and watching. He laughed once, softly, confused more than anything. "I think you might be mistaking me for someone else." "No, I'm not," she said. "My name is Leela Monroe. My mom said I was born from a donor, a blood donor and a sample. I wasn't supposed to know, but I found the papers." She opened the folder, pushed it toward him, hands trembling. "My mom got cancer last year. They said I had to be tested to see if I was a match. They ran my DNA. It matched yours. It's real. I double-checked." He didn't touch the folder. The nurse looked up, caught the tension in the air, then quietly stepped out. Nathan stared at the pages, then back at the girl. At her face, framed with light brown hair and soft curls. Her eyes weren't his, but something about the mouth, its quiet determination, the way she held herself, felt vaguely familiar, alarming even. He stood abruptly, ripping the tape from his arm. Blood welled briefly before he pressed a gauze pad down and secured it with a band. "You shouldn't be here," he said tightly. Her mouth twitched. "I told my aunt I was going to the library." Nathan's voice was lower now, calmer in the way that hinted at things being very not calm beneath. "Where's your mother?" "She died 5 months ago." The blow landed quietly, but it landed. Nathan didn't sit down again. He picked up the folder, opened it reluctantly, skimmed. There it was, his name in the DNA comparison section, the highlighted percentages that meant something he hadn't authorized, hadn't expected. Words like high probability of biological relationship. Words that seemed clinical, harmless, in a file but devastating when delivered in a little girl's voice. "You found this," he asked, "and just decided to come find me." She nodded. "Does anyone know where you are right now?" "My aunt thinks I'm safe, and I am. I just wanted to meet you just once." Nathan looked past her out the window, The skyline glittered, busy and cold. The air in the room felt different now. Dense, off-kilter. "I have to go," he said. Her lips parted. "Oh." He handed the folder back without looking at it, without looking at her. "I'm sorry about your mother." Then he turned, walked out of the room, and left Leela standing there, her backpack slipping farther down her shoulder. He didn't stop moving until he was in the elevator, descending at impossible speeds toward the life he understood. He told himself he'd done the right thing, that this was probably a scam, that it didn't matter what the folder said or what kind of impossible twist of biology had led to that moment. But somewhere deep and quiet and unignorable, something in him had shifted. A question took root. What if she was telling the truth? And even more disturbing, what then? Because Nathan Calloway didn't do children. He didn't do spontaneous connections. He didn't do any kind of life that required something more than control. But Leela Monroe had just looked him in the eye and called him her father. And now, whether he wanted it or not, he was already becoming something else. Nathan didn't return to the office that afternoon. He told Marla to clear his meetings, then walked the city for hours, long after the sting of the needle had faded from his arm. His coat collar was up against the wind, his tie loosened, his shoes scuffed from curbs he usually avoided by taking cars to and from every place he went. There had been moments in his life when things fractured, split open, demanded something more than strategy. His divorce had been one, his father's death another, but this was different. This was a girl, a name, a small voice in a sterile clinic saying the word Dad like it belonged to him. By the time he returned to his penthouse on the Upper East Side, it was nearly dark. His home was quiet, vast in the way that expensive places often are. He didn't turn on any lights, just walked through the rooms slowly until he ended up in his study. The file folder was still in his hand. He hadn't realized he'd taken it with him until then. He laid it flat on the desk and stared. He read every page now, not just skimmed. It was all there. Records of the donation clinic he'd visited 12 years ago during his early rise in the company, before he understood PR, before Marla managed his schedule like a general, before he had enough money to believe he was above consequences. They offered compensation. He hadn't cared about that. It was a favor to a colleague who had mentioned it in passing, a strange, one-time thing. He'd forgotten about it almost immediately. The next page detailed the match, the embryo, the birth record with redacted fields, mother's name removed by legal protection clauses. But the DNA test was recent. It had Nathan's full name, his company, his birth date, and the match was as undeniable as it was unsettling. Leela Monroe was not lying. He poured a drink, didn't touch it, just watched the amber liquid hold still in the glass while his mind spiraled. He didn't call anyone, not even his lawyer. Instead, the next morning, he found himself outside a narrow brick house in Astoria. It was modest, almost hidden among newer condos and shops. There was a wind chime over the door that jingled every time the breeze kicked. He stood on the porch, still in a suit, but without the usual certainty in his posture. He knocked once. The woman who answered had her hair in a loose bun, a paint-smeared sweatshirt on, and a wary look in her eyes. She blinked when she saw him. "You're him," she said. "You're the aunt." She hesitated, then opened the door farther. "Come in." Her name was Tess Monroe. She was the younger sister of Leela's mother, Julie. The living room smelled faintly of turpentine and lemons. A canvas stood on an easel in the corner. Leela's backpack was by the door, and a pair of sneakers were kicked off nearby. "She told me," Tess said, gesturing for him to sit, "about what she did, finding you, going to the clinic. She's resourceful. She's too smart for her own good." Tess ran a hand over her face. "She didn't mean any harm. I swear she didn't think you'd care. She just wanted to know." Nathan sat on the edge of the couch, unsure of what to do with his hands. "I didn't even know she existed." "I figured. Why didn't Julie tell me?" Tess gave him a long look, because she was scared. She used a donor program for a reason. She wanted to raise Leela on her own, and she did. You were never supposed to be more than a line on a clinic form. "That's what I thought I was." They were quiet for a moment. A clock ticked on the wall. Outside, a car door slammed. "I'm not here to take her," Nathan said, "or interfere. I needed to see it for myself." Tess looked at him then, really looked. "You don't seem like the kind of man who likes surprises." "I'm not." "She surprised me every day," Tess said, softer now. "Even when she was sick, especially then." "Julie." Tess nodded, her eyes grew distant and something in her mouth quivered before she steadied it. "She made me promise to take care of Leela. I didn't know until after the funeral that there were origins, that she wasn't just mine now. There was this whole other part of her out there." Nathan looked around the room at the framed photos, Julie laughing. Layla, younger, missing teeth on a beach somewhere. Nothing about this place belonged to his world. "She's mine," Tess added after a moment, "but she's also yours." He didn't respond to that. Instead, he said, "Can I see her?" Tess studied him. "She's at school, but I can tell her you came." "I'd rather you didn't, not yet. You want to watch her like some kind of stranger behind glass." He flinched. "I want to understand." "She's a kid, Nathan. Not a problem you can dissect with quarterly reports." "I know that." "You sure?" His hands flexed in his lap. "No." Tess softened just a little. "Okay, then maybe come back tonight for dinner. She won't expect it, but maybe she'll be glad." He stood, unsure how to thank her. She reached for a sweater draped over a chair. "Just be honest with her. She's been lied to enough already." Nathan returned that evening, and when Leela opened the door, her eyes widened, shocked but not frightened. "You came," she said quietly. Nathan nodded. "I'm not very good at this." "That makes two of us." Dinner was spaghetti with too much parmesan and awkward pauses between every bite. Nathan sat stiffly, answered Leela's questions when she asked them, dodged others he didn't know how to handle, like where he lived, what he did for fun, if he had any pets. "No," he said, "I don't have time for them." She frowned at that, fork suspended. "You don't have time for a dog." "I barely have time for myself." Leela seemed to absorb that. Then she said, "Maybe that's why you're lonely." He didn't argue. There was nothing to argue against. After dinner, Tess stepped out to take a call. Layla and Nathan sat in the living room, a quiet stretching between them again. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook, handed it to him. "What's this?" "My mom's letters. She used to write them to me sometimes, for later. I thought you should read one." He hesitated, opened to a page in the middle. "Leela, if you ever find him, don't hate him, don't be afraid either. He didn't know I chose that. And if he turns out to be anything like the man I once met, strong, smart, too serious, then maybe you'll like each other after all. Maybe he'll learn something too." Nathan closed the notebook. His throat felt tight. "Thank you," he said. She nodded. And for the first time since she'd said the word Dad, he didn't feel like the floor was giving way beneath him. He just felt quiet and present. And maybe, just barely, he felt like something was beginning. Nathan didn't tell anyone at the office about Layla, not yet. He returned to work the next morning as if nothing had shifted. The same schedule, the same urgency in every meeting, the same way people looked at him with polished respect and a little fear. But beneath the surface, something had cracked open. She had given him that notebook. It sat in the inside pocket of his coat now, worn at the edges from her hands. He hadn't stopped reading the letters. He read them on the car ride to work. He read them in quiet corners of his penthouse at night. He read them when he should have been focusing on investor calls. Julie's voice on those pages was nothing like he expected. She was funny, grounded, sharp, and in every letter there was Leela painted in tender, detailed strokes. The girl who used to sleep with socks on her hands because she thought it made her braver. The girl who named every pigeon she saw in the park. The girl who once stood up for another kid in class, even when it got her detention. Nathan felt the shape of her forming in his mind, more vivid than the memory of their brief conversations. And somehow that image made him feel both closer and farther from her at once. 2 weeks after that dinner, he found himself at a school. He hadn't warned Tess, he hadn't warned himself. It was a Tuesday, cold and clear, and he sat in his parked car down the block from the schoolyard. Windows rolled down just enough to hear the distant bell and the low hum of kids pouring out into recess. And then he saw her. Leela wore a green puffer jacket and mismatched gloves. She wasn't with anyone at first, just kicking at a patch of old snow under a tree, talking to herself, lost in her own world. Then a boy ran up beside her and said something. She looked up, smiled, and pointed at the sky. Nathan didn't move, he barely breathed. He'd told himself he was just checking in, seeing how she was, making sure she was okay. But watching her there, utterly separate from everything he knew, something in him ached in a way that had no shape. She looked different from that day in the clinic. Lighter, less guarded, like she belonged here, in a place that had nothing to do with boardrooms or mergers or 5-year growth plans. She turned suddenly and looked straight at him. He froze. But her face didn't change. No panic, no anger, just a tilt of her head, curious. Then the bell rang again, and she disappeared into the school like a leaf caught in the wind. That night Tess called him. "I heard you were outside the school," she said. Nathan didn't try to deny it. "She told me, said you looked like a detective on TV." He sighed. "That wasn't my intention." She didn't seem upset, just confused why you didn't wave. He looked out at the skyline from his office window. "I didn't want to be seen." "Why?" He didn't answer. But the next weekend, he showed up at Tess's house again, this time with a bag from the corner bookstore. He handed it to Layla like he was passing off a business proposal. She opened it slowly, eyebrows lifting as she pulled out the thick stack of fantasy novels. "I didn't know what kind you liked, so I asked someone at the store." She smiled just a little. "You got all the good ones." That afternoon, he stayed. They played a card game Tess taught them. Leela asked if he knew how to cook. He said no. She called that a tragedy. They ordered pizza. Nathan ate his with a fork until Leela teased him out of it. Later, when she went to the kitchen for soda, Tess leaned in. "She likes you, you know, even if she doesn't know what to do with it yet." "I don't know what to do with it either." "Well, start small, keep showing up. That's what she'll remember." He took that to heart. Over the next month, he visited once a week, always with something small, books, puzzles, a plant he killed within a week. He never stayed long, he never overpromised, but he showed up. Sometimes they walked to the park near Tess's house. Other times they just talked. Leela told him about school, about the girl who used to be her best friend but now preferred someone else, about the substitute teacher who wore ties with dancing cats on them, about the stories she wanted to write when she was older, about brave girls who weren't afraid of getting things wrong. Nathan told her about his office, his assistant who could probably run the country if she wanted, the coffee shop downstairs that gave him free muffins and never smiled, how he used to think silence was a strength until she started filling his Saturdays with chatter. One night, Tess invited him to stay late for dinner again. Leela made tacos, proud and clumsy in the kitchen, and Nathan watched her cut tomatoes like it was the most important thing anyone had ever done. "She likes you here," Tess murmured while Leela rinsed lettuce. He glanced at the doorway. "I don't know how to be what she needs." "She doesn't need perfect." "I'm not sure I have anything else." Tess smiled. "She needs someone who listens. You're getting there." After dinner, as he pulled on his coat, Leela stood at the door, twisting her sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "If my mom didn't want you to know about me, does that mean you don't want me either?" The question landed like a stone, dropped in deep water. Nathan crouched in front of her. He didn't know how to make his voice soft, not the way Julie had, but he tried. "I didn't know you existed, Leela. And the moment I found out, I didn't stop thinking about you. I might not know how to be a dad, but I'm not going anywhere." She didn't answer, but she leaned forward and hugged him, just briefly, her arms thin and determined. When he stepped outside into the cool night, he felt it again, that strange, quiet shift. The beginning of something that couldn't be scheduled or planned, something fragile, something real. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Nathan began rearranging his life in ways that startled even him. He started blocking out Saturday afternoons. No meetings, no emails, no lunches with potential investors. Just white space on his calendar that Marla side-eyed at first but never questioned out loud. Some Saturdays he'd take Leela to the Natural History Museum. Other times they'd sit on a park bench, watching squirrels fight over discarded pretzels while Leela told him everything she'd noticed about the people walking by. She had an eye for detail that made him pause, how she caught the softness in someone's eyes, the uneven rhythm of a walk, a kindness tucked into small gestures. He found himself listening more, speaking less. One Saturday, she asked if she could see where he worked. Nathan hesitated. He looked at her curious, hopeful, her chin tilted up the same way it had been in the clinic that day when she told him who she was. So the next weekend he took her. Callaway Tower rose above them like a monument to another version of his life, one that had felt unshakable until she entered it. He led her through the lobby, nodding to security, ignoring the way eyes followed them. Marla met them in the elevator, arching a brow before giving Leela a warm smile. Nice to finally meet the mystery guest. She's not a guest, Nathan said. She's my daughter. Marla blinked, then softened. Well, that explains the canceled boardroom Saturdays. Leela beamed at that. Nathan showed her the view from his office, let her spin in his chair, watched her feet dangle off the edge. She pointed at the skyline and asked which buildings he liked best. He told her he didn't really look at them anymore. You should, she said. They look different every day. He looked. It was true. Afterward, they stopped at the company cafe, and she insisted on trying the espresso brownie, which she declared too serious, like it had forgotten it was supposed to be dessert. Nathan laughed genuinely and couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that at something so small. Later, as they rode the elevator down, she stood close to him, not holding his hand but near enough to feel the shape of her presence. Nathan, she asked quietly. Yeah. Do you think I should call you Dad? He hesitated, startled by how the question hit him like an invitation and a responsibility all at once. I think you can call me whatever feels right. She nodded, okay. She didn't say it that day. But a week later she did. They were at Tess, sitting on the couch, playing a ridiculous board game involving flying chickens and dice towers. Leela rolled, landed on a square that made her groan dramatically, and said, I blame you for this, Dad. The word hung there for a breath. Nathan didn't move. Then she laughed and kept playing, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe in that moment it was. Later that evening, when Tess was washing dishes and Leela was sprawled on the carpet with a puzzle, Nathan stepped into the kitchen. She called me Dad. Tess didn't look up from the sink. I know. He exhaled, slow and shaky. It felt like I didn't deserve it. She's not giving it to you because you earned it, Nathan. She's giving it because she wants to. He nodded once. And then gently, Tess asked, have you thought about what comes next? He knew what she meant. The visits, the weekends, they couldn't live in limbo forever. There would come a time for decisions, for defining roles, for choosing something more permanent. Nathan wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. But fate, as it often does, didn't wait for him to catch up. That week Tess had to travel unexpectedly. A cousin out west had a complicated surgery and no one else could step in. I'll only be gone for 5 days, she said, packing a small suitcase while Nathan stood in her hallway. Leela's never been away from me that long, but she's older now. She'll be okay. He nodded. Then she looked at him, and something in her eyes shifted. She should stay with you. What? She trusts you, and I think it's time. Nathan's mouth opened, then closed. Tess, You've been a father to her in everything but name. It's only 5 days. Let her see what it's like. Let yourself see. He didn't agree right away, but he didn't say no. The next evening, he stood in his penthouse, watching Leela walk through the front door with a duffel bag and wide eyes. This place smells like expensive soap, she said. It probably is. Do you have snacks? No. Okay, we'll fix that. She explored every corner like she was mapping a foreign planet. She opened every cabinet, checked the view from every room, sat on the floor in the living room and declared the rug barefoot-worthy. Nathan watched her move through the space like she was teaching it how to breathe differently. They settled into a strange, lopsided rhythm. He learned she took her cereal dry, didn't like orange juice unless it had ice in it, and always had a notebook with her to write stories. She learned he liked quiet in the mornings, read the news on his phone while drinking his coffee black, and had no idea how to use the oven. They argued about bedtime once. "You're not a real parent if you don't make rules," she said. "I don't know the right rules." She shrugged. "Make them up. That's what grown-ups do." He took her to school each morning in a company car. She made him promise not to let the driver call her miss. He packed her lunch once, badly. She teased him about it for days. And then one night, after a movie, after hot cocoa, after a silence that felt safe, she asked him a question that stopped him cold. "Do you think my mom would have liked you?" Nathan looked at her, the glow from the kitchen lights softening her face. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I think she would have. She had good taste." He laughed once. "You didn't even know her favorite food until 2 weeks ago." "Still," she said, curling into the couch, "you're trying, that matters more." That night when he stood outside her door after tucking her in, he didn't walk away right away. He leaned against the frame, listened to her breathing settle into sleep, wondered how the hell he'd gone from power lunches and mergers to bedtime stories, and spilled cocoa on his couch. And then he realized he didn't miss the old life the way he thought he would. He missed this when she wasn't here. He missed the color she brought to the silence. 5 days passed. Tess came back. Leela ran into her arms and talked for half an hour straight about the view from the penthouse, the taxi driver who sang opera, and the time Nathan burned toast so badly the fire alarm went off. He was trying, though, she added, as if that made all the difference. When Nathan left that evening, Leela followed him to the door. "Will you still come Saturday?" she asked. He looked at her, knew without needing to be told what she really meant. "I'll be here," he said, "every time." She smiled, nodded, then did something she'd never done before. She took his hand. Not for long, but long enough. Spring came late that year, slow and shy against the hard edges of the city. Nathan noticed it first not in the parks or the trees, but in Leela's drawings. She had taken to sketching in the backseat of the car or on the floor of his office, pages scattered with half-finished birds, bare trees budding soft green at the tips. She always said she didn't like spring much, it made her nose itchy, but lately her worlds were filled with it, and he saw it too in the way she walked, like something in her had settled, rooted. She was more at ease with him now. She didn't hesitate to speak freely. She laughed more often, in that way that broke through the tension he still sometimes carried in his shoulders. She asked about his day, about the woman who kept calling from Tokyo, about why he didn't have any photos on his walls. One Saturday, he let her help him hang some. They went through old boxes he hadn't opened in years. She found pictures of him in college, longer hair, worse posture, a photo of his parents before their divorce, a dog he'd had as a teenager that he hadn't thought of in over a decade. "Do you ever miss them?" she asked. "Sometimes." She didn't press. She chose a photo of him and his sister, Sarah, on a camping trip when they were kids, both covered in dirt, grinning, holding sticks like swords. "This one," she said, "it's the only one where you look completely happy." He didn't argue, he hung it near the front hall. After that, she started leaving things in his apartment: a toothbrush, a book with a cracked spine, a pair of socks with tiny stars on the heels. She never asked if it was okay. She just did it like it had already been decided. He found he didn't mind. One night over takeout and homework, Leela said, "Do you know I have to do a presentation on my family tree?" Nathan's fork paused. "That sounds intense." She shrugged. It's fine, I just don't know what to say. You can talk about Tess. I will, but it's a tree, Nathan. It's supposed to have branches. He watched her pull her knees up to her chest on the couch, her loose braid falling over one shoulder. I don't know what to do with the space where my mom is, or where you are. He set his food down, leaned forward. What if you make it your way? It doesn't have to look like everyone else. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. Maybe I'll draw it in pencil, leave room for the parts still growing. He smiled at that. Days passed, soft and steady, and then came the hearing. Tess had filed the guardianship paperwork months ago, but now that Nathan had entered the picture, there had to be a formal decision. Nothing dramatic, no courtroom battle, just paperwork, testimonies, signatures. Still, it felt like a hinge, a moment that could swing either way. They sat in a small room with a mediator, just Nathan, Tess, and a quiet legal representative who scribbled notes and asked a few questions. Why do you want this to be joint? The woman asked. Tess spoke first. Because Leela needs both roots and reach. I can give her one, he can give her the other. Nathan nodded once. Because I didn't know she existed for almost 12 years, and now that I do, I can't imagine my life without her. There was no resistance, no conflict, only paperwork. When it was done, Nathan stepped out of the building into pale morning sun. Leela was sitting on a bench across the plaza, swinging her legs. He sat beside her. So, she said, do I get to make fun of you for being nervous now? I wasn't nervous. You looked like you were trying not to breathe. He gave her a sidelong glance. I was preparing. For what? For the next 12 years. She laughed, leaned into him. That's going to be a lot of Saturdays. He smiled. I'm counting on it. They spent that afternoon at a community fair Tess had read about. There were booths and local artists, cotton candy that turned their fingers blue, and a dog in a tutu that made Leela laugh so hard she nearly dropped her lemonade. At one point, Nathan found himself sitting on a bench while Leela and Tess watched a juggler. He looked around, not at the phone in his pocket, not at the world he usually escaped to, but at the place he was in. Sunlight filtered through the trees. Someone was playing soft jazz on a corner saxophone. A little boy with painted tiger stripes across his face waved at Leela. She waved back. And in that moment, Nathan didn't think about the company or the next board meeting or the number of unread emails piling up in his inbox. He thought about how quiet his home used to be. He thought about the space beside his couch that now held a small pair of shoes. He thought about the word dad, how it had once felt foreign, even threatening, and now felt like something he didn't want to live without. Later that night, Leela was dozing in the backseat of the car. Tess sat up front, window cracked, the air just cool enough to feel like early summer. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Nathan turned to her. What? Letting her in. He shook his head slowly. Every part of my life that used to feel full now seems half empty when she's not in it. Tess smiled at that. She's lucky, you know. I think I'm the lucky one. They pulled up in front of Tess's house. Leela stirred, blinked awake. We home. Almost, Nathan said, unless you want to stay with me this weekend. She yawned. Do I get pancakes? I'll try not to burn them this time. Then yes. She climbed out, dragging her bag behind her, already talking about the next story she wanted to write. Something about a girl who finds a map hidden inside an old book and the stranger who turns out to be her real family. Nathan followed her, bag in hand, heart a little steadier than it had been even a few months ago. There were no sudden declarations, no dramatic scenes. Just the quiet unfolding of something right. By the time he tucked her in that night, her small hand gripping his briefly before letting go, he knew. He wasn't just showing up anymore. He was home,